The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Unrelenting winter, communities still without power, bracing for below freezing temperatures as another round of winter weather moves into already hard-hit areas. Plus,
Donald Trump constantly interfering, threatening election workers, threatening the integrity of our state-run elections. It's bananas.
the FBI raids the election office of the Georgia county that was a focal point for President Trump's attempts to overturn his 2020 election loss. Then strategic steps. The new move from the White House to restore diplomacy with Venezuela after the capture of Nicolas Maduro. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for being here with us on this weekend edition. We take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect. Starting with the states on track for heavy snow this weekend as a potential bomb cyclone forms off the East Coast. Models show it will hit the Carolinas and parts of Virginia. Forecasters predict even Atlanta, Knoxville, and Roanoke could see some flakes. Despite the frigid temperatures on the East Coast, states out west are experiencing an unusually warm start to the winter this year. Since the start of December, temperatures are running above 4 degrees above average in Reno, Nevada, putting them on track to have one of the warmest winters on record.
We are seeing more rain as opposed to snow at these lower elevations, and certainly it's well understood now that Reno is one of the fastest warming cities in the United States.
Experts say a continued dry pattern could have consequences later this year. While soil moisture and reservoirs are in good shape now, the lack of snowpack could impact runoff and increase wildfire risk in the summer.
DHS, as the Secretary has said, is conducting an investigation, as they should and as they do every time there's a tragic event like this. And the FBI, in their role, which is a separate role from DHS, is also looking into it and conducting an investigation. And that's not that shouldn't be treated as making news. It's just we've said that for a week.
The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights probe into Alex Pretty's death that happened 1 week ago this weekend. The Homeland Security Department says the FBI will lead the federal probe. Customs and Border Protection is also doing its own internal investigation. This as White House border czar Tom Homan is vowing to stay in Minnesota and continue leading all ICE operations until, quote, the problem is gone. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris reports.
Homan announcing Thursday that massive changes are coming to Minneapolis, while demanding that the hostile rhetoric and threats against ICE agents needs to stop. The border czar also sharing he reached agreements with local and state officials that would eventually, quote, draw down the number of federal agents in the city. In Minneapolis Thursday, White House border czar Tom Homan speaking out for the first time since being sent to the Twin Cities, demanding that the hateful rhetoric stop.
I begged for the last 2 months on TV for the rhetoric to stop. I said in March, if the rhetoric didn't stop, there's going to be bloodshed. And there has been.
Following the fatal shootings by federal agents of Renee Good and Alex Pretty, President Trump sending Homan to Minneapolis to find a solution to rising tensions. The border czar saying Thursday the federal government hasn't been perfect.
I do not want to hear that everything's been done here has been perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, and anything can be improved on.
Homan vowing Thursday to remain in Minnesota, leading ICE until the problem is gone, directly addressing the FBI's investigation into the signal chats allegedly being used by residents to track federal agents, sharing some strong words.
I'm not going to answer a lot about that because I'm not going to show our hand, but they'll be held accountable. Justice is coming.
President of the National Border Patrol Council, Paul Perez, echoing Homan, telling the National News Desk this investigation needs to be done.
We need to target these groups so that they can stop. We need to go after the funding. We need to find out exactly where this is being orchestrated from, who's behind it.
Perez also speaking to the video surfacing of agent encounters with protesters and the fatal shootings of Good and Pretty, saying the footage doesn't always tell the entire story.
They don't show what happened minutes before, where agitators have, either assaulted, pushed, shoved, or even spat on some of our officers.
Now, in response to Homan's comments, Minnesota Democratic Senator Tina Smith speaking out, saying she was hoping for more detail than what was offered.
I'm looking for information about when troops are leaving. I think ICE needs to get out of Minnesota. I think it is dangerous when they are there.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey also urging federal leaders from D.C. Thursday to stop Operation Metro Surge, calling out federal agents.
It is less safe when we have roving bands of agents marching down the street just looking for somebody who might be concerned. And I gotta tell you, everybody is concerned when you have that kind of occupation.
Now, aside from the drawdown plan, Homan also announced that ICE and CBP operations in Minneapolis will start moving away from broad street sweeps and instead focus on targeted enforcement on people with criminal convictions or active criminal charges. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Developing now, former CNN anchor Don Lemon faces charges following the anti-ICE protest at the Minneapolis church earlier this month. Lemon was covering the incident, which showed protesters rushing into the church, interrupting a service. Lemon's attorney says he was acting as a journalist, not a protester, but Justice Department officials say Lemon had no right to be on private church property. People across the country are expected to rally together for a weekend of protests against ICE. Organizers are dubbing it a national shutdown, calling for people across the country to not work, not show up for school, and not to shop on January 30th. The movement is being led by several student groups at the University of Minnesota. On Saturday, the 31st, a variety of protests, demonstrations, and vigils are planned across all 50 states and Washington, D.C. by the national grassroots organization 5051. While more than half of voters approve of President Trump's job on border security, a new Fox News survey finds a majority disapprove of how he is handling immigration. Take a look right here. We've got the numbers on your screen. 59% of voters say ICE is too aggressive. That's a 10-point increase from July of 2025. Some 17% of Democrats approve of Trump on border security, compared to 9% on immigration. Among Republicans, it's 89% and 85% approval, respectively. Leaders in Fulton County, Georgia, are pushing back after the FBI seized documents tied to the 2020 election Wednesday. This comes as President Donald Trump continues to target the county in his assertion that the 2020 election was stolen. Fulton County officials say the move is about intimidation, not uncovering new facts, and insists past audits already confirmed the results.
Any honest review of these files will show what every previous review has shown. Fulton County elections are fair and lawful, and the outcome of the 2020 election will not change, period.
Reviews have found no evidence of widespread fraud. The search comes a month after the Justice Department sued Fulton County officials to access records from the 2020 election. A judge has not yet ruled in that case. President Trump says he is nominating Kevin Warsh to replace Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chair. Warsh is a former inflation hawk who now favors lower interest rates, according to a number of public statements he's made in recent months. The Senate Banking Committee will consider Warsh's nomination through a public hearing. After that, the Senate chamber will vote on whether or not to confirm him. That news comes as the Federal Reserve this week is keeping interest rates where they are for now. The key rate will stay at 3.6%. The Federal Reserve said in a statement this week the job growth was solid, an upgrade from last month's modest characterization. Current Fed Chairman Powell says policymakers feel like they are in a good position to wait and see what happens next.
Having lowered our policy rate by 75 basis points over the course of our previous 3 meetings, we see the current stance of monetary policy as appropriate to promote progress toward both our maximum employment and 2% inflation goals.
Inflation is hovering around 2.8%, and the unemployment rate is generally stable despite significant softness in the labor market. There could be more movement later in the year. Trump has promised his next pick for Fed chair will lower rates further. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was on Capitol Hill this week defending the administration's operation in Venezuela to capture Nicolas Maduro. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has that story from Washington.
It was for Iran.
In his opening remarks Wednesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio making it clear the administration has not ruled out further military action in Venezuela should the interim leadership in place go against the United States.
We want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela and democratic.
It was Rubio's first public hearing since the operation earlier this month to remove Venezuela's dictator Nicolas Maduro from power.
He was an impediment to progress. None of the things we're talking about now, not the release of political prisoners, not the transition of the oil industry to a legitimate oil industry, not the erosion of Iranian, Russian, or Chinese influence. None of these things would have been possible as long as Maduro was there.
While senators on both sides of the aisle lauded the surgical performance of the U.S. military, Democrats pressed Rubio on their concerns, chief among them, the White House keeping Congress in the dark.
We were told that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table.
This is a very unique situation that we faced here. This mission could not have been briefed to Congress because it wasn't even in the realm of possible until very late in December.
Rubio also addressed the interim plan for the sanctioned Venezuelan oil, a process where the United States will ensure the proceeds from oil sales go towards funding the government's day-to-day operations and reforming the oil refining process to better serve the Venezuelan people long-term.
This is not going to be the permanent mechanism, but this is a short-term mechanism in which the needs of the Venezuelan people can be met through a process that we've created where they will submit every month a budget of this is what we need funded. We will provide for them at the front end what that money cannot be used for. And they've been very cooperative.
Rubio confirmed they are in the process of establishing a diplomatic presence in Venezuela, including reopening the embassy and installing a U.S. ambassador to the country for the first time since 2019. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now. Developing now, in the first of its kind, the families of two Trinidadian men are suing the federal government for strikes on boats in the Caribbean. They say one of those attacks killed their family members. 26-year-old Chad Joseph and 41-year-old Rishi Samaru are believed to have been on board one of the boats. Their families say they were working in Venezuela and got a ride on a boat to return home and had no connection to drug cartels. Meantime, President Trump says U.S. citizens can return to Venezuela as the South American country's commercial airspace is reopening. It is a sign that relations are normalizing between the two countries after the U.S. ousted its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, earlier this month.
So I want to thank the leadership of Venezuela. We're getting along really well with them. The relationships have been very strong, very good, and they have informed me that they feel there's very good security, very strong security.
Venezuela's acting president says the U.S. also started unblocking the country's assets. We keep hearing that space is becoming the next battlefield, and this isn't just a theory anymore. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and this also is not the first time that we've been in a space race with Russia and now China. Break down the main components of space warfare.
So in simple terms, space warfare is pretty much about controlling or disrupting the satellites and space systems that modern militaries depend on. So that includes things like communications, GPS, intelligence collection, missile warnings, and also targeting. So if you can blind or disable those things, you can gain a major advantage on the ground, at sea, or in the air.
And it's not something that we're just talking about in movies here, as we suggested. I've read actually some reports that the U.S. military is already using space this way.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. So Axios, they reported that after the U.S. captured Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro, officials revealed that U.S. Space Command actually helped carve a path for U.S. forces moving through a blacked out Caracas, which they used space-based capabilities to overcome communications and visibility challenges. We don't know the details, but that's space directly shaping ground operations today.
Yeah, and the details of that capture that continue to come out are just fascinating. Emma, thank you. Emma's going to join us in a few moments to dig into one of America's biggest competitors in space dominance, China.
Coming up next, new video allegedly shows a prior encounter between Alex Preddy and ICE and immigration officers. A former U.S. attorney explains the legal standards around firearm carry. Plus, the DOJ officially filing charges against the man accused of attacking Representative Ilhan Omar. How much time behind bars is on the table? The Department of Justice has released more pages related to its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche announced the documents include more than 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images from the investigation into the accused sex trafficker.
There is extensive redactions to images and videos. To protect victims, we redacted every woman depicted in any image or video, with the exception of Ms. Maxwell. We did not redact images of any men, unless it was impossible to redact the woman without also redacting the man.
The DOJ says any information identifying victims, depictions of child pornography, or anything that would jeopardize an active federal investigation is not in the release. Continuing our coverage, these new videos obtained exclusively by the news movement appear to show Alex Preddy clash with federal officers in Minneapolis 11 days before his death. Their crews were already on the ground filming a documentary when they got a tip to head to the scene. On Thursday, I spoke with former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick for an in-depth look.
In these videos, Preddy appears to have his gun on him. In the January 13th video, he doesn't hold it, but he has it. That's what we're being told. He then spit on a federal agent and then kicked a taillight of a federal vehicle, which you can see. Could he have been arrested then? Did he commit a crime then, in your opinion?
Absolutely, Dee Dee. I think he could have been charged with 2 crimes. One is when he spit towards the federal ICE agents. You know, that's assaulting a federal officer. And also when he kicked that taillight off, that's the destruction of federal property. And so the agents chose to take him to the ground. But I think a real question is, why wasn't he arrested on that day? They certainly had probable cause to arrest him. They could see that he seemed to have committed 2 crimes right in front of them.
And obviously, as new video and images come to light, this will all be investigated, and we hope to get some more answers. But what is the legal standard? If you are in possession of a lawful firearm, which is seen in one of these videos, but then you approach agents, how does that impact how they are lawfully able to respond? Does an officer have to feel their life is being threatened before they use deadly force?
So the standard for the officer is whether they reasonably fear for their life in a volatile situation. But anytime you bring a gun into a situation where it's a high-stress sort of protest with people blowing whistles and with cameras very close to the faces of an ICE agent, then you're adding much more stress and volatility to a situation, because not only does the officer have to be aware of where the firearm is, it's also putting the other bystanders or the other protesters at risk when you bring a firearm. So it puts the officers in a much more difficult situation when one of the protesters in these volatile situations is carrying a firearm. The officer's got to be aware of where that firearm is, and so do the bystanders, the other protesters. So it's not a good idea, in my opinion, to bring a firearm to one of these protests.
As you saw these videos, what was your first thought?
Well, I think the main thought I've got, Dee Dee, is I hope we have an independent investigation. On the one that he was shot and killed, I think we have to have that outside agency. I would suggest the FBI to look at it, whether the officers reasonably feared for their life at the time that they shot him. You know, our country has great deference to law enforcement. Judges and juries give them the benefit of doubt in these situations. But I think for our country to have confidence in what happened that day, I think we need to have an independent investigation, and I would suggest the FBI is best suited to do that.
Former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick, thank you for joining us and for your insight tonight.
Thank you.
The Justice Department filed charges against the man accused of spraying Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar with a mixture of water and apple cider vinegar. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has the details from the live desk.
The Justice Department charging 55-year-old, you see his mugshot back here, Anthony Kazmierczak, with forcibly assaulting, opposing, impeding, and intimidating an officer or employee of the United States while engaged in official duties. The charges stemming from this incident right here happening Tuesday night at a town hall in Minneapolis. Kazmierczak allegedly charging at Omar using a syringe to spray her with a mixture of water and apple cider vinegar, which, according to the Congresswoman, may have reached her right eye. In an interview with ABC News following the attack, President Trump, without evidence, suggesting Omar may have staged this incident, saying, quote, she probably had herself sprayed knowing her. Omar then responding.
Well, the difference between the president and I is that I was raised to be a decent human being, and my faith teaches me to have compassion. And he lacks both of those things.
Now, if convicted, Kazmir Sak could face up to 1 year in prison on a misdemeanor charge, or up to 8 years if he's found guilty of making physical contact with the Congresswoman.
The state that's now considering moving all employees to a 32-hour work week will explain. And crash victims could have fewer options in California. The new ballot measure backed by Uber and how it would impact care after an accident. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Fresno, California, and an Uber-backed ballot measure that may limit care for accident victims. Medical providers and personal injury attorneys say the bill could limit care to the uninsured and underinsured. Supporters of the bill say the measure protects consumers, cracks down on fraud, and helps lower overall car insurance. But opponents say the measure is a scam for the working class.
They pay you $300, $500, $700 on a $30,000 bill. Who ends up paying the rest? Uber wants you to pay. Bottom line.
The bill caps attorney fees at 25% and limits the amount medical providers can recover for treating patients. That includes medical payouts reduced to Medicare prices and banned financial relationships between providers and attorneys. Tonight, Washington state lawmakers are now debating a bill that would move the state from a standard 40-hour work week to a 32-hour work week. Of course, on paper, moving to a 32-hour work week is appealing for many people.
Americans work annually 125 more hours yearly than workers in Canada, 204 hours more annually than workers in Japan.
Critics across different industries, most notably the hospitality industry and farming and agriculture, are sternly against the move. If signed into law, the work week change would go into effect January 1st, 2028. Coming up, a bizarre attempt to free Luigi Mangione from jail. The unusual weapons police say a man brought to spring the alleged United Healthcare CEO killer. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Some sad news to report. The actress best known for her roles as the mother in Schitt's Creek and Home Alone has died. Catherine O'Hara was 71 years old. Also, a judge ruling Luigi Mangione will not face the death penalty. The news comes after officials say a man showed up to a New York City federal jail impersonating an FBI agent to try to break out Mangione. He allegedly claimed he had orders from a judge to release him. Upon a search for officers, they found what looked like a pizza cutter and a barbecue fork. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com.
We'll ensure that Americans don't just end their lives with a nest egg, but instead all Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg.
Trump accounts officially unveiled this week, which aims to help families start saving and investing for their children the minute they're born. On top of the federal government's $1,000 initial contribution, employers and businesses will also be allowed to contribute. Parents can open a Trump account later this year. Coming up next here on the National News Desk, hotels are becoming the centerpiece for anti-ICE protests. The city's now seeing a surge and the dozens recently arrested. Also, tech giants heading to court. The landmark battle brewing for child safety online. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. We'll be here and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Eliminated until now, the significant health concern over a massive airborne virus outbreak in the U.S. Plus,
immigration smackdown. I'm Christine Frazan with how a top issue for President Trump now has Americans feeling differently.
Then, once science fiction, now a real battlefield, the next frontier of war. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Gatton, and we begin this half hour with new developments emerging involving multiple anti-ICE protests, both inside and outside hotels across the country. This last week, federal and local law enforcement making dozens of arrests in several states. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more on the cities being targeted and the new arrests.
New York is another area being targeted by anti-ICE protesters. Over 65 people were arrested Tuesday after a protest broke out in the lobby of a Hilton in Tribeca. Those arrests following the over 2 dozen in Maple Grove, Minnesota on Monday outside a Marriott, where protesters thought Border Patrol was staying. The NYPD confirming at least 65 people were arrested Tuesday after this protest broke out in the lobby of the Hilton Garden Inn in Tribeca. Those in attendance protesting the hotel chain's alleged housing of ICE agents.
Hilton is housing the modern-day Gestapo. While people are being murdered on the street and kidnapped, they are resting peacefully up there.
The justice group Planet Over Profit posting this video on X showing dozens of those protesters holding signs and chanting in the lobby.
No one is illegal. Power to the people.
Officers say the crowd blocked pedestrian access and repeatedly refused orders to leave, leading to their arrests. A spokesperson for New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani issuing this statement, writing in part, quote, Mayor Mamdani commends the protesters who exercised their right to protest against ICE today, adding the mayor is also pleased with the NYPD's response to the protest and that today's demonstration concluded without violence. Former DHS senior advisor Charles Marino telling the National News Desk he believes when it comes to these hotel protests, the DOJ and all law enforcement agencies are going to want to connect the dots.
So that means now going from just arresting the people to now also issuing search warrants for things like bank accounts.
Steps he says are important to better understand possible coordination and funding sources.
The extent that these individuals are part of larger organizations and how these larger organizations are interconnected and how these individuals are being funded.
Now, the arrests in New York City also come just a day after 26 people, many of whom have criminal records, were arrested outside a Spring Hill Suites Marriott in Maple Grove, Minnesota, where protesters thought Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino was staying.
Step back! Move back! Stand down!
Local police saying the situation escalated when they began damaging property and throwing objects at officers. Attacks Marino tells us need to be investigated.
DOJ and law enforcement are going to have to get to the bottom of this to really understand what kind of threat this represents.
Now, earlier this month, Hilton also severed ties with a franchised hotel in Lakeville, Minnesota, after the property repeatedly refused to provide rooms to ICE agents. Attorney General Pam Bondi also announcing Wednesday as well the arrest of 16 Minnesota rioters for allegedly assaulting law enforcement. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
In just 1 year, President Donald Trump has seen some of his highest poll numbers on immigration become some of his lowest of all time. So what's happening? And will his recent strategy shift make a difference? National correspondent Christine Frazan breaks it all down.
It was nicknamed the Biden border crisis, the effort to take a more humane approach to immigration that resulted in millions showing up at this country's borders and in large part being allowed to stay. The issue dominated the 2024 election, with poll after poll showing it was one of the top concerns that propelled Donald Trump to a second term in the White House.
We had a border that I inherited where millions of people were coming through. Now we have a border where no one is coming through.
Trump touting illegal border crossings in 2025 falling to the lowest levels since 1970, and his aggressive campaign to arrest and deport criminal migrants in the U.S. illegally, which our unscientific online poll shows broad support for. But a New York Times Siena poll released last week shows a large majority of voters, 63%, disapprove of how ICE is handling its job.
No more ICE! No No more ICE!
That includes some big tech CEOs who have largely stood by Trump, like Apple's Tim Cook, calling for de-escalation in an internal memo. One from OpenAI's Sam Altman said what's happening with ICE is going too far. Anger has reached a boiling point after 2 American citizens were shot and killed in Minneapolis by federal agents just this month.
We should own the issue of border security and immigration, but they have destroyed that for Republicans. Something that got the president elected, they have destroyed it through their incompetence.
Senator Tom Tillis and other Republicans blaming Trump advisor Stephen Miller and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who Democrats say must go.
We will commence impeachment proceedings against Kristi Noem in the absence of her being fired.
Also on Capitol Hill, several Democrats say they plan to block one of the 6 spending bills from moving forward. It provides funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which they say needs to make some major changes first. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Jury selection began in the landmark social media addiction lawsuit this week. I spoke earlier this week to former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani, about the court's main focus and what that will be on in this case. A 19-year-old who is central to this case claims her early age social media use developed her addiction and exacerbated suicidal thoughts. As you take a look at your screen right here, Nima, the lawsuit claims in part the defendants borrowed behavioral and neurobiological techniques used by slot machines and exploited, they say, by the cigarette industry. How do you prove the company's apps are actually doing this and causing that addiction they claim?
Dee, thanks for having me. I'm sitting here in downtown Los Angeles, about a mile away from the courthouse where this is all happening. And like you said, one of the big issues in this case is going to be causation. We know, obviously, mental health is a big issue for teenagers. But was it caused by these tech companies, these social media apps, or was it something else entirely? It could be their family, it could be their friends, school, obviously. There are a lot of factors at play here. So that's one of the big issues in this case, establishing causation. Were the apps responsible for these mental health issues?
Well, as you know, TikTok and Snap, they already settled ahead of this trial. This is going to be the first time we hear from major tech executives before a jury. What are your expectations?
Well, this is the bellwether trial, so it's the first, and depending on how this goes, it's really going to determine how the thousands of other cases filed in state and federal court throughout this country, are they going to settle, or will these tech companies become emboldened and fight those cases? So it's really a test case. And obviously, we know that there are First Amendment defenses here. There's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So this is one of those trials, Didi, that could easily go both ways. And those 12 men and women are really going to have to decide who is responsible for the harm suffered to this 19-year-old.
And many tech companies, they have maintained that they have put safeguards in place and aren't responsible for third-party content. I know this is something, a jury will eventually have to decide here, but important to point out that some research even suggests frequently checking social media in early adolescence, just look at this headline, may be associated with brain changes. How could medical research like this set a new standard with this case, with future cases, similar cases?
Well, we're going to have the battle of the experts here, and I think we all know how addictive our phones can be. We're always on it, talking, texting on the social media apps. Obviously, children, they're much more susceptible, but certainly you're going to see doctors, medical experts on both sides that are going to come and they're going to opine. Some are going to say that this is addictive. I mean, you heard the analogies, as bad as cigarettes. And I think really the example we'll probably see most are the vaping, the Juul litigation, for instance, that was targeted allegedly to these young children, right? With whether it's on social media or different colors and that type of thing. Because obviously, when you are a company, you want to get someone addicted early. I'm not saying that's what big tech is trying to do, but if you get them hooked early, obviously they're going to be a client or an addict for life. So that's the argument that these mental health professionals and doctors are going to make here.
It really is a case that touches every corner of the United States, and of course we're watching it closely. Former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani, as always, thank you for joining us. The measles outbreak in South Carolina is now the largest in the U.S. since the disease was declared eliminated. As of this week, the number of measles cases grew to 789, surpassing Texas's outbreak last year, which saw 762 cases. At least 18 people have been hospitalized, according to the state health department. The disease was declared eliminated in the U.S. in 2000. However, the spread of measles over the past year has left the U.S. at risk of losing elimination status. The Pan American Health Organization could decide to revoke that status when it meets in April. Many experts say the days of simply fighting wars on land and sea will soon be over. At least that's what world powers are gearing up for. Space warfare is no longer just a concept in movies or books. It's actively unfolding. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And China is obviously, one of the biggest adversaries at this point of the U.S. Where do they stand with all of this?
So according to the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission's 2025 annual report, Beijing now explicitly views space as a warfighting domain. So what does that mean? Well, China's goal is space superiority here, not just for prestige, but more so to maintain a stronghold on information, which it sees as a prerequisite for winning future conflicts.
What does that actually look like in practice, though?
So over the past decade, China's basically launched more than 1,000 satellites, which has just dramatically expanded its ability to conduct persistent surveillance, communications also, and precision targeting, especially in the Indo-Pacific. So the report says that these capabilities are essentially designed to monitor, target, and challenge U.S. and allied forces, and also to support long-range strike systems, which is really concerning.
Well, if the U.S. falls behind, it sounds like some experts are simply saying this could reshape American life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, according to the Commission's report, losing leadership in space would mean more than just like symbolic defeat like we saw with the Cold War. It would really threaten U.S. national security, weaken deterrence, undermine economic competitiveness, and allow China to shape the rules, the standards, and the norms governing space for decades to come. So in their words, it would amount to relinquishing the advantage first that was originally secured during the original space race, and kind of putting it into terms that would be a lot more jeopardizing at this point.
Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
And much more to this topic online, including links to Emma's sources. Just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from social services fraud to the future of Gaza.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. For weeks now, we've been focused on social services fraud. It turns out it's not just daycare centers in Minnesota. There's also a targeted campaign to take advantage of people struggling with alcohol and drug addiction and billing Medicaid for services never provided. This is happening in several states, but it's become extremely prevalent in Arizona. Our Christine Frizzau just returned from there. Christine, how much money are we talking?
Steve, estimates at this point are staggering. $8 billion for money for services that were not rendered. So yeah, we spent some time on the ground in Phoenix. Now, many Native American reservations are nowhere near Phoenix, but the heads of these programs will literally drive to reservations in Arizona, North Dakota, Montana, really anywhere. And what they do is they ask people, hey, do you need help with your alcohol addiction? They look for people who are seeking help on Facebook, and they drive, they pick them up, often in a white van, and they take them to these homes in Phoenix. The problem is, in a lot of these homes, they're nice homes, they're rentals, but there's no programs there. These aren't professional. These aren't licensed. Once in a while, they give them a Zoom link to talk to somebody. But other than that, they sit around. Meanwhile, the men and women running these fraud sober living homes, they are billing Medicaid through the American Indian Health Plan, and they get paid out sometimes as much as $8,000 a day per person. And not only are these people not getting any help, they're given drugs like methamphetamine and even fentanyl. That gives them a new, harder drug, to break the addiction. At least in Arizona, 40 people have died and hundreds more are missing.
They allowed drinking. They allowed a lot of use of, drugs.
That doesn't sound like sober living.
It doesn't.
And how many different homes did you go to?
I've been to 8.
And did any of them help you get sober?
No. So we have our people that were being trafficked into these homes, whether they were brought from different states, from the reservations, they were all being put into these fraudulent sober living homes. And so then there's stolen benefits that they were taking their American Indian Health Plan and, you know, charging up to $8,000 a day per person.
Now, while I was there, I was also able to talk to Arizona's Attorney General Chris Mays. She's actually already prosecuted more than 170 people in these scams. She calls this the biggest scandal in the state's history.
National correspondent Christine Frizzell, great work out there, and looking forward to seeing more of your reporting. Meanwhile, Israel has finally recovered the body of the last hostage in Gaza and confirmed the identity. It marks the first time since 2014 that no Israeli hostages were in the enclave. Our national correspondent Kayla Gaskins is following that story. Kayla, President Trump celebrating the recovery. What does this mean for the future of Gaza?
So, Steve, returning all of the hostages was a key element to this U.S.-brokered Israel-Hamas peace plan. President Trump celebrated the moment this week. It also means the peace plan has now moved into phase 2, which includes reopening Gaza's border crossing with Egypt and also the deployment of an international security force to the Gaza Strip. But this also means Hamas is now under even more intense pressure to disarm. I spoke with a former Mossad official this week, Sima Shine, about Gaza. Mossad is Israel's intelligence agency, and Shine said while Hamas has been greatly diminished, they still exist. She estimates around 22 to 25,000 Hamas fighters are still in the Gaza Strip.
They have less and less, of course, very trained people. They have less arms that they have been producing, but they know how to do it, and therefore it's very important to make sure that they don't do it, that they are disarmed. And we are now in the second stage, and the second stage includes disarmament of Hamas.
Do you think Hamas still existing in Gaza is the single biggest impediment to rebuilding the Strip into something?
Sure, no question. No question. They want to rebuild Gaza, but they don't want to disarm themselves. And that doesn't go together.
Trump's Gaza plan stipulates Hamas members who commit to peaceful existence and decommission their weapons will be given amnesty, and those who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Steve.
National correspondents Kayla Gaskins, Christine Frizzell. Excellent reporting as always. Thank you both for your hard work. And back to you.
Coming up next year on the National News Desk, the Texas woman who turned her neighborhood into an ice skating rink and caught on camera the moment the ceiling of an Oklahoma hotel collapsed while guests were eating breakfast. We'll be right back after this. News Desk, team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We are taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where a candy store has now created a unique treat going against immigration enforcement, but not everyone is a fan.
Over 500. That's how many marshmallows with the words "Ice Out" written on the containers have been purchased in the last 24 hours. The candy store said 100% of the proceeds are going towards families and individuals that have been negatively impacted by immigration enforcement. The store posted about the marshmallows on Facebook yesterday, the post already garnering more than 100 comments. We reached out to the owner, who agreed to an interview, but canceled, overseeing backlash online. She did, however, send a statement, writing, quote, "Our decision to fundraise is rooted in one simple belief. When people in our community are hurting, we show up. We are not here to argue politics. Our focus is mutual aid, families in crisis, and human dignity. That is who we have always been, and that is who we will continue to be."
ICE is barely 21 years old, but they're drunk with power.
Dauphin County Commissioner Justin Douglas says he stands behind Suite 717.
I think that's a great way to support their neighbors and to talk about and open a conversation about the reality of the impact of ICE. And so, look, I'm going to buy some marshmallows.
This afternoon, I spoke with Republican Senator Doug Mastriano, who's questioning the broader message.
It's troubling. So we're going to celebrate, attacking law enforcement here. And it's interesting, the left, they have their, their rock stars, George Floyd and Good, and now, others that have recently been attacked. But we don't hear much about Laken Riley, who was, murdered, raped, and assaulted by an illegal. We have ICE going in, trying to remove some of the worst offenders, child molesters, rapists, murderers from our streets to make our communities safer. Why is the left the guardians of murderers and rapists?
Panic, shouting, and flooding filled the Embassy Suites lobby in Norman on Saturday morning, turning a complimentary breakfast into a scary situation.
The lights start to flood down, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Tony, you need to move. There was little girls that were crying because they were scared.
No injuries were reported. 2 days later, the area is closed off and a disaster relief company was on site. A hotel guest on Monday reported staff told him the fire suppression system froze and burst.
Leander's ice-coated streets and sidewalks were a fall waiting to happen for just about everyone except Kimberly Tyler Shafiq.
I was so excited. I felt like it was Christmas. Ran outside. I was like, let's get our skates on.
For this mother of two, the treacherous conditions that had most people hunkered down inside were a winter wonderland.
It was just such a unique experience to be skating in the streets of Treviso and Leander, and just having a blast, just enjoying making memories with my children.
Both of Kimberly's daughters are skaters. Kimberly and her daughters are some of the few people in Central Texas who think the sleet melted way too fast.
Still ahead here on the National News Desk, thinking about retiring, the best and worst states according to new research. Plus, time is running out, why scientists say the end of the world is closer than ever before. New information as we come back on the air. Wyoming is the best state to retire in 2026, according to Wallet Hub. Florida, South Dakota, Colorado, and Minnesota round out the top 5. Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Kentucky came in last. Wallet Hub says its rankings are based on several factors like the cost of living, low crime rates, and favorable tax laws. The doomsday clock is now 85 seconds to midnight. The bulletin of the atomic scientist keeps the clock as a symbolic representation of how close humanity is to destroying the world.
The risks we face from nuclear weapons, climate change, and disruptive technologies are all growing. Every second counts, and we are running out of time. It is a hard truth, but this is our reality. It is now 85 seconds to midnight. This is the closest the world has ever been to midnight.
Last year, the clock was at 89 seconds to midnight. Melania, a documentary about First Lady Melania Trump, can now be seen around the world as the First Lady caps off her first year back in office. She's giving the public a rare glimpse of her life behind the scenes. The documentary follows her in the 20 days leading up to President Donald Trump's White House return. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Just check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, stay warm. Have a great week.